Welcome and hello. Welcome to the Go Plan video library that includes Greenleaf Financial Fitness Series and other financial professional series involved with personal financial wellness. This series, along with other videos, will be posted on our Go Plan YouTube channel, websites, and other social media outlets. My name is Jim Hiles, and as your host, I think it's important to highlight what financial wellness is and how tools like Go Plan 101 can help Americans achieve their goals and wishes. So, what is financial wellness? It is defined as the overall financial health of an individual. What it does for you is probably most important. It helps you increase understanding all things related to money. It can also help decrease stress, help you make better decisions, and perhaps most importantly, keep you on track as things change in the future. What's Go Plan 101? Well, Go Plan 101 combines web technology and educational content with behavioral change solutions, free software, and a huge resource center full of focused responses. Translation? Simple. Go Plan 101 is a cool site that helps people deal with their money issues so they can do what they want to do. And you also have the capability on our site to talk to a coach or go right to the resource. At the end of the day, financial wellness is only as good as the actions taken. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Greenleaf Financial Fitness Series, Take 3. Hopefully everyone is still out there and you can hear us. Today's topic is paying for education. We really apologize for the technical difficulties. You know who the players are. There they are. Let's get right into it. Okay. Basically, we have some serious issues with college inflation, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that first, the cost of college, the inflation rates, and why it's such an important topic today. So Jim Hiles was going to give us a little bit of information about that.
Thanks, guys. So the issue today is the cost of paying for a college education, and we've seen quite an increase in the college overall. If you look at this chart here, you'll see that the cost of college education has gone up dramatically. Who remembers 1984 if you're around? If you were to take the college costs in 1984 and then project them forward to today, you're going to see that the cost for college has gone up for a private school about 2.5 times. This is after inflation. For a public school, it's actually gone up 3.25 times. So even though public college, a four-year college, might be less expensive, it has actually gone up at a higher rate of growth since 1984 than the private non-for-profit four-year college education. So we got a lot to handle here when it comes to funding higher education.
So that those numbers are adjusted for inflation.
That's right.
So let's talk about the costs, the actual costs.
Sure. If you have to look at this, and you know, this is astounding when you start looking at it. If you haven't seen this before, you'll. I don't want to pick up off the floor here, but this is an average public four-year in-state college tuition is $20,000. And several years ago when I went to college, it wasn't anywhere close. For a private school, this is average, $45,000. So this is the sticker shock effect that college funding is having.
And if we look at, these are averages, right? So we're here in New Jersey. If you look at the cost of Rutgers, it's almost $31,000 for in-state tuition, room, and board, and up to $47,000 for out-of-state.
Yeah, so think about that. $47,000 for an out-of-state to own to Rutgers. How are you going to pay for that?
It's a tough one. Well, we know firsthand, right? So looking at covering the costs, right? If you want to send a kid to college, let's say this full container represents the total cost of college, the full sticker price. And you can see that if we take the total cost of an education and then subtract what is called the EFC, the expected family contribution, we're left with an amount that's considered what your financial need number is. And the financial need is then met using any combination of the items on that list. So that's loans, grants, scholarships, work-study programs, all federal programs to make up the difference. And then, of course, additional personal funds if that's not enough. And how do schools arrive at the EFC, the expected family contribution? And that's done by reviewing your FAFSA, which is a tongue twister, but that stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And keep in mind that in order to receive your EFC number or to be considered for any federal financial assistance, those loans, grants, and including work study, you must complete a FAFSA every year. So keep in mind also that this EFC number is their estimate of what a family can afford to pay based on their financial information. It's not necessarily what a student actually pays. Quite frankly, it's not necessarily how much you can actually afford, but it is the number that they use, the school uses, to determine what the financial aid is, what financial aid amount a student is eligible for. Many schools also now require the College Scholarship Services profile, or the CSS profile, and that's to be completed to be considered for non-governmental aid, which is often the school's own grants, loans, and scholarships, and it takes a deeper dive into the income and assets of a family. This is more commonly required these days by private schools in addition to the FAFSA. Okay, let's look at the financial aid and weightings. Here are some other details you should know. Assets and income, as a matter of fact, are weighted more heavily in the EFC when they're in the child's name. So it's better from a financial aid standpoint to have assets in the parent's name. A financial asset is weighted at anywhere from 2.6 to 5.6% if it's in a parent's name, and 20% when it's in the child's name. Now let's look at the four types of financial aid that are out there. First, we have need-based aid, and this is where obviously a student cannot afford to pay for the full cost of college. We have merit-based aid, in which the student will receive a scholarship or grant money based on exceptional performance in either sports or academics. It's usually the school's money, but there are also federal scholarship and private scholarships available. We have negotiated aid, the third one down, which might be used when a school has a hard time recruiting individuals to come to their school. Not every school has a massive waiting list. So the college will negotiate a financial aid package to draw more students. And then last, we have discounted tuition, where we have, an empty seat in a school and overheads being paid. So a college will typically give discounted tuition to a student that will improve their statistical averages. The last two, negotiated and discounted, are really two sides of the same coin, because either way, you are negotiating and receiving a lower tuition bill. So this will all obviously help with our next slide, and Jim's going to talk a little bit about what our options are from a loan standpoint.
Okay, so that was a mouthful there. You have to fill out a government form, and you need to see whether or not it's what your EFC number looks like, and then whether or not you need this CSS number. So don't be intimidated by this. And the one thing I will say is, having gone through this a couple of times myself, colleges are for sale. Things are negotiable more than you might think, and you want to really consider colleges, even outside those you might consider as first-rate colleges in your mind. Look abroad, because the college landscape has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. And you may find that if you enlarge in your scope of where you look, that you have opportunities you didn't think of before. And like I said before, college is for sale. So how do you pay for it? One of the ways you can do that is you can borrow money, and there are generally three different ways you can do that. You can borrow from a federal student standpoint as a student loan. It can be subsidized or unsubsidized, depending on what you qualify for. The parent can go out and borrow and basically do a PLUS loan, which is another federal loan that the parents go out and borrow money to pay for their child's education. Or there are even private loans, which this could be a form of a home equity loan or some type of borrowing against some of the assets you have, maybe even your retirement plan, to help fund a college education.
Which we obviously caution people to be very careful about. So, because if you borrow, obviously you have to repay. So let's look at the reality of student loan payments. Student loan debt is at an all-time high. We hear it all the time. The average student loan debt in 2018 for a four-year college graduate is more than $39,000. So that payment is real money to a 20-something-year-old, over $400 a month for a 10-year payoff. If you want to pay it off in 5 years, it's over $700 a month. So again, that's only average. We know that there are a lot of recent grads out there who are making what amount to mortgage payments for a four-year degree, and even more so for advanced degrees. It's such a common issue that we're seeing a lot of employers now start to offer student loan repayment assistance as a benefit to attract college graduate employees, because obviously these payments can be a big strain.
So when you look at monthly payments, you look at $40,000, your total, and you do $424 a month, you paid that for 10 years. You're basically all in about $51,000 to borrow the 40. So obviously one of the ways you can look at this is and say, instead of borrowing the money and paying for it later, maybe we look at it differently and start ahead of schedule and figure out what the number might be. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at that. So on this slide, what if you took the $424 that you would have spent knowing that you borrowed the money, and you actually set it aside ahead of time? Imagine that. 5 years or even 10 years. That same $424,000 in 10 years at 6% will get you 70 grand. I mean, that is a huge difference compounding in your favor if you can imagine putting aside the money that you could pay the loan off with later. So what you try to do is start investing as early as you can. Start now. It doesn't really matter when the right age is, just start now.
That's right. So let's look at some of the common ways over time people have basically saved for and paid for college. Obviously, first one we have is a bank or an investment account. Second, we have, depending on your state, is UTMAs or UGMA accounts, basically gifting the money to the minor. Coverdell educational savings accounts, ESAs, originally called education IRAs, and really the most popular savings vehicle we see today are college 529 savings accounts. So let's take these one by one and talk about the ups and downs of that.
Yeah, so this is we get questions where how do I pay for my kids' education? And if you've got savings set aside already that's in a savings account or an investment account, then you certainly can use those. Keep in mind that you're using your money dollar for dollar. Some may have tax implications. If you sell an asset, you might have a capital gain tax you have to pay to create the money to pay for the education. We get questions about, can I just use my IRA? Well, the answer is you can, but there's an issue with that, and IRAs are tax deferred. So if you take money out of an IRA, you're going to pay ordinary income taxes on that. What about my Roth IRA? Can I take out of that? Potentially, yes, you can, but there could be some tax implications or maybe restrictions depending on when you funded your IRA. The good news is, if there's any, is there's no 10% penalty tax if you're underneath the age of 59 and a half if you use it for IRA. So let's talk about different ways where you can set aside money where you have control over it in some way. And that is what we often see is people set up something called a Unified Transfer to Minors Act or Unified Gifts to Minors Act. UTMA and UGMA accounts, generally these are done at banks. This is generally the first account a parent sets up for the benefit of a child. The good news is there's no contribution limit on this. However, there could be an issue when the child reaches age of majority. So you just got to be aware that when majority, generally the age of 21, they become an adult, it's their money. It's the custodial relationship stops, and technically it becomes a child's money where they control it. And typically there's no tax advantage with a custodial account like this. So just be aware that when you set up these UTMAs that they may have a different idea for what should be, how they should take that money out than you do.
Right. So we have people out there, including ourselves, right, that don't want to necessarily give money to a child and have it become the child's money at age 21, whether they want to use it for college or not, right? So what do we do about that?
Yeah, well, there are different trusts you can set up. There are minors trusts. The minors trust 2503C, fancy legal term. It's actually an IRS tax code. You can set up a trust to allow for the trustee to manage money on behalf of a minor, but on the other hand, it does revert back to the now adult at age 21. There are other trusts you can do called gift trusts or irrevocable trusts where you can essentially set aside money for the benefit of a child or grandchild, and the trustee writes in the document how that money should be distributed, if at all, to the beneficiary. So you can put a lot more controls around that if that's of concern.
Got it. Okay. Now we'll touch just briefly on Coverdell educational savings accounts. You can see the limits here. They're still around, but since the growth in popularity of 529 plans, we really don't see these being opened very much, if at all, anymore. So we'll move on and talk about 529. And Jim's going to tell us he's got some experience with the prepaid plans.
Yeah, the prepaid plans are popular because these are generally state-funded vehicles, 529s are, and many states offer what's called a prepaid plan where you can essentially say, look, I want to send my kid to college, and the state will come up with a program that says, okay, if you want to send your kid to college, we're going to lock in rates based on what we know the rates are today. And although your child is not going to go there until they're 18, it might be 15 years from now, we're going to basically discount you so that you're paying, say, $13,000 a year for a $20,000 a year tuition based on today's dollars. This allows you to lock in, and you know that you can, at a discounted rate, basically buy a 4-year college education at somewhat of a discount. The earnings on this are all deferred. However, the earnings are relatively low because they tend to be based on guaranteed rates, and the state may have some restrictions. If you decide not to send your kid to a state school, they may say, that's a problem, you have to pay taxes on this now, or there may be other restrictions if you want to go out of the state. So be aware of the fine print with prepaid plans.
Very good. Okay, now let's talk about 529 savings plans, which are the more common that we hear of. Contributions are, these are very popular for a lot of reasons. Contributions to 529s are not restricted in any way by how much income you make. Anyone can contribute to your child's plan. So we see grandparents, aunts, and uncles getting set up online now so they can make contributions on birthdays and special occasions, and we encourage that. Contributions are made with after-tax money. Some states do allow a state income tax deduction. Those rules vary quite a bit, so be aware of those rules. If you want help with it, reach out to us and we can give you some guidance there. Many employers are now offering payroll deductions as a way to contribute to these plans over time and on a regular basis. So if you're an employer and you want to discuss how to set that up and get discounted pricing, get in touch with us and we can talk about how that works. The earnings on 529 savings plans grow tax deferred. Withdrawals are tax-free for qualified college expenses and also now for private, even middle schools.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the control that happens in 529 and some of the tax advantages as well. When you set up a 529 plan for the benefit of a child, you keep control over that, and there's no, like the UTMA account, at age 21 they get the money. You can essentially decide who the beneficiary is going to be. You can change the beneficiary. You can move it within the family, even down family lines. You can even put it between spouses. So there's a lot of opportunity and flexibility within the 529 in terms of who gets the actual money at the end. The 529 plan is not a device to set aside money for the benefit of somebody else because it needs to be used for qualified education. But you can also do something called front-end load. Gift tax law says that you can give to your child $15,000 a year. Husband and wife together can give $30,000 a year. A special thing with 529 plans is you can front-end load it. You can do your gifting in advance. You can actually set aside $75,000 or $150,000 per couple by doing what's called front-end loading. This allows compounding on the money to take place sooner in a tax-deferred account. The last point here is these assets are not part of the estate.
Very good. So let's just, some more facts that we need to know about is, as we talked about earlier, this is considered a parent's asset for financial aid and control purposes if it's owned by a parent or a dependent child. Flexible, there's a lot of flexibility on school choices. Now, you're even allowed to take out $10,000 per year, up to $10,000 for private elementary and high schools. It's also transferable to another beneficiary.
Let me jump in on this. So that's a big change. You can now use a 529 for private elementary and high schools up to $10,000 per year. So you get the question, should I take this money and put it in a 529 plan and then turn around and pay for my private elementary or high school? Generally, the answer is no, because you lose compounding. The idea of a 529 plan is to let the money grow and compound over time. Now, if you've got enough money set aside for the child's college you're trying to fund for, and you're confident that's going to be the case, then maybe you can divert it to paying for elementary or high school, but we highly recommend staying with college.
Right. And as I also mentioned earlier, we can set these up as a payroll deduction and get discounted fees when your employer does that. So we're available to help with that.
Does that cost anything, Jim?
Nope, there is no cost. As a matter of fact, as I said, they actually get a discount on the fees of the typical 529 plan. So it does make sense for employers to look into that.
Great. So let's look at a quick summary here. I know we started off late today, but we're catching up here, and apologize for technical difficulties, but I think it's important to know where you are, and what we mean by that is put together your finances. If you go to gfplan.com, you'll find that you under documents, forms, budgets, and something called an asset liability form. This puts together a lot of the same information that the government's going to ask you when you apply for your FAFSA form. Still can't say
Tongue twister.
And understanding that education is extremely important, and we think does, based on what we've seen in the research, pay off for the benefit of someone who's going through it. On the other hand, you want to prioritize your goals as a family. Education is important. Retirement is very important too. So you have to figure out how you're going to make sure the dollar is going to stretch, make sure that everyone is happy. So I'd say that step back, take a look at where you are. Drink a cup of coffee because you're going to need the energy to get through the process, but it will work to your benefit if you go through the planning.
Right, and understand your EFC, right? So how do you do that? You complete a FAFSA and review your funding options that we've talked about here today. Most importantly, if still possible, start early. That makes a huge difference when it comes to saving for college. And then, of course, invest wisely, invest accordingly.
So we covered a lot of ground, and let's just summarize. It's time to put this information to work. We live in a wonderful and a free country, but it's up to us to take responsibility and move forward, particularly on our personal financial wellness. So let's take some action here. Let's go and explore this financial stuff. Take a buddy with you if you need to. Have some fun. Learn a little or learn a lot about what you can do financially. These videos and websites, I hope you enjoy. I think they're great. But if you're like me, sometimes you just want someone to talk it out with. So seek out coaching from our site from professionals who've been vetted to provide you with complimentary initial consultations as being part of the Go Plan 101 experience. If you've not started your planning, or even if you have, use today's video to explore the area of concentration. Make sure you understand how it impacts you. My favorite quote is, life doesn't go in a straight line. You need to stay on top of it. So consider subscribing to our newsletter or our YouTube channel. Please reach out to me if you want more help or have questions. And lastly, thank you for listening. Now, go plan and go attain your financial wellness goals. Jim Hiles signing off for today. Take care.